This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
I never thought of my art as a commodity. I never did art with the idea that I was going to sell it. I always did it because I felt something.
Jesse Kaufman, I have known you for a very long time, but this is a real treat for me, and I really kind of struggle how to define you because you have so many talents. You're an artist. You have had this incredible career in graphic arts and design and marketing. You worked at NBC in New York. You were in the military. So we're just going to hit a little bit on all of that.
Wonderful.
But first, where are you from? You didn't grow up around here.
I did not. I was born, I like to tell people I was born on an island, and I was born on Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York, right on the water. You could look out the front of my house and you could see the water, and if at that time the Verrazano Bridge had been built, you'd be able to see it from where I lived. And we lived there until I was 5. Then we moved to another beach called Howard Beach in Queens, right across the border, about 12 miles east of Coney. And I lived there until 1968, when I went in the military.
Wow.
And came out of the military, lived in Manhattan with a young lady I am still with. And from there we came to Tennessee.
Right.
And the rest is history, I guess.
Well, you came to Tennessee, and we're going to get to that, because you came to Tennessee, really, to live on the land, right?
Exactly.
Just live off the land.
That had a lot to do with the job I had in New York at NBC.
Yeah.
I started out as a graphic artist, and there was a lot of turnover in the news. It was live news.
Network news.
Network news. I started in local, but I moved up to network news. And the one question that the art director asked me when I came was, could I work under pressure? I thought that was interesting, and I said, of course. And the reason he asked that was because if you couldn't stay there.
Right.
We had an absolute 5 o'clock deadline, no ifs, ands, or buts. And a lot of people couldn't handle it.
And it was nightly. It was the nightly news with John Chancellor, right?
It was John Chancellor, yeah, nightly news. And it was an exciting time in history. A lot went on, and I had grown up familiar with New York City.
Sure.
You know, even as a young kid, we used to hang out in New York City. And to work at Rockefeller Center was exciting. At that time, it was hard. It was hard because there was just no good news. The war was on.
Right.
And it got to a point where I didn't want to have kids in that city.
That's when you knew you needed to go.
Yeah.
But let's talk just a minute about that, though. You worked at a time when technology wasn't necessarily there.
Everything was done
right?
by hand.
Everything was done by hand. So you did graphics for the news?
I did graphics for the news, yeah. All the lower thirds and all the maps and anything that wasn't video. And there was video. They shot 1-inch video. But we didn't have any computers.
Right.
And I would go to an 11 a.m. production meeting, get what were assumed to be the news of the day, the stories of the day, go back to the studio and begin to prepare the graphics for that show. But anyone who works in news knows it changes. And so the pressure of that job was when we went on the air, it was always interesting in the control room at NBC because besides watching NBC's monitors, we were watching ABC's and CBS's. And so the producers would change the script immediately if those two stations started with a story that we weren't starting with.
Oh. If they scooped you, you would switch to something.
We had to move that story up in the script, which of course changed everything.
Right.
And we used to have a saying called top of the show. And that meant we had to get a graphic immediately because it had changed. And somebody would run down to the studio and try to do the work and get it done within time to get back for the next segment. Wow. It was exciting. It was exciting. And working at NBC was exciting because beside the news, we did all the sports. And that was the time of the moonshot.
Oh, right.
Well, it was actually after the moonshot, the one where we landed on the moon. And we had a tremendous set on the 8th floor of NBC that was a replica of the moon.
Oh, wow.
And we had Bill Baird's marionettes who were astronauts, and we had a little rover that was remote control. And when the satellite went around the back of the moon and you couldn't get any reception, we did it on the set, and it was exciting. It was so exciting. Yeah, we did the elections.
Oh, wow.
72 elections I worked on. All the football picks and all of that sports stuff that I knew nothing about.
That's exciting.
It was fascinating. Yeah, high pressure.
No, really high pressure, and you probably landed that job because you were an incredible artist. I mean, you started at the age of 12. I read.
I did. I started. I used to go to the Brooklyn Museum for drawing. But yeah, I always wanted to be an artist. Always, just growing up, that was what I wanted to do. Used to paint on my friends' cars, or nobody was allowed to get tattoos, so I used to draw on their arms with colored pens. But yeah, it was just something I always wanted to. I can't remember when I didn't want to be an artist.
We're in your studio here in Cookeville. What inspires you in your art?
It's emotion. I never thought of my art as a commodity. I never did art with the idea that I was going to sell it. I always did it because I felt something. And not all of my work is that kind of work. You can see there are portraits, and I do that as almost as an exercise to keep me being able to say, yeah, you can paint. You can paint something someone can recognize.
Right.
But most of the time, it's just an emotional feeling, a release. Same with the writing I do. It's just a way to express myself. And honestly, Becky, I do that making a pizza. Okay?
Right.
I feel really fortunate to have been blessed with a creative urge.
Well, let's talk about Janet, because you guys have been together a long time.
46 years.
Wow.
Legally, yeah.
How did you meet?
We met on a Memorial Day in 1966. My brother-in-law got me a job in the Catskill Mountains as a waiter, actually as a busboy. And I drove up there, and this first weekend, they were having a conference of young girls, 300 young girls, and we were told two things. One, we weren't going to be busboys, we were going to be waiters, and two, stay away from the girls. That was really difficult. Yeah. And I got fired. And but I met Janet, and I got rehired. Yeah. But I met Janet, and she was young, very young, and we became friends, though. And I went off after the summer. She had actually come back at the end of the summer, and we got to see each other one more time, exchanged addresses. But I was in college and was lost.
Right. You were in college at Hofstra, right?
At
Studying
Hofstra.
art.
Yeah.
And then did you marry before you went into the military?
No. We married in 71. I got out of the military in 70. I was actually out early.
Tell me why you went into the military.
Like I said, I grew up in a family, 3 brothers, my dad and 2 uncles, who were all World War II, Pacific Theater, action experienced men. And I grew up under their stories. They didn't hide much from us. They told us mostly the good times they had, the camaraderie. But it was just a natural thing to be interested in it. And even as a young boy, I was a Boy Scout for a while, but then I joined the Sea Scouts, which was really a naval paramilitary organization.
Oh, wow.
Learned to march, learned to do close order drill. When I went to Hofstra, I had to go to ROTC. That was a requirement. And didn't like the way I looked in Army green. It just didn't, it wasn't comfortable.
Yeah.
And so always in the back of my mind was if I went in the military, I would go in the Navy. I didn't think I could do the Marines. So,
So what did you learn from that?
well, I learned a few things, Becky. One was we live in a great country. And like it or not, history shows this, we need a military. It's just any country that's going to exist as big as America is needs a military, needs a strong military. I learned discipline. I also learned that at times you find yourself having to take orders from people, A, you may not agree with, B, you may not respect, and yet there is value in discipline. And I found that out, and I carry that with me. I also learned to work on airplanes, which was fascinating because I was, when you go in the military, you're tested. And my aptitude, having grown up with my father who was a mechanic, I knew tools. And when I went to sign up for the Navy, the recruiters said, "Oh, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I'm an artist." He said, "Well, we don't have artists in the Navy." I said, "Well, you have photographers." He said, "Yeah, put that down as your first choice." I said, "Great, I'm going to be a photographer in the Navy. I love it." And then at the bottom where I had to sign, it said, "I volunteer for aviation." I said, what is that? He said, "Oh, that's a formality. Don't worry about it." And once you're in there, you learn that recruiters are somewhat like poor car salesmen. You really can't believe
They
what
got to
they
get
say.
you. They got to get you in.
Right. They got to get you. And he got me. But I loved working on airplanes. That was fascinating. Interestingly, though, in the military, they put you where they need you. And although I was trained on aviation mechanics, I wound up doing statistical analysis for aircraft maintenance. So my math teachers would have been really surprised that I could do that kind of work because I had to make reports, monthly reports on all the aircraft. And I was stationed at a test pilot school in Patuxent River, Maryland, which was really, for that time, a state-of-the-art facility. We had 32 different airplanes, and each plane had computers in it, believe it or not, that could challenge a pilot's ability to fly by being able to manipulate conditions of the plane. So they could throw a switch in the back of the plane and the pilot would be flying on one engine.
Oh my goodness.
Or in a storm, or all manner of different things.
So you could simulate all that?
That was real.
That was
up in the sky.
Simulation.
Oh yeah. And you had to be a combat experienced pilot to get into the test pilot school. All the astronauts came to our school. And toward the end of my enlistment, I was fortunate enough to do a little, they found out I was an artist, finally, after having been in, and asked me to do a book about the astronauts that were coming back for a reunion. That was the last thing I did in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
Was to
The
do
Apollo astronauts?
These were, these were, I think, Apollo 11 or, I think they were Apollo 11 astronauts, or 8 or 11 that were coming back. Yeah. And like I said, it was a difficult place for somebody like me who didn't like school and then wound up in the military. And of course, the first thing they do is send you to school. I went to school for over 6 months to train.
You and Janet end up in Manhattan, and you are working at NBC, and then you decide to leave NBC, New York, with a group of friends to move to Tennessee.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, that happened from working at NBC because I would come home and say, boy, I don't even want to tell you what's going on. We had all the ticker tape coming in every day and had to decide what was going to be on the show. But the news was just terrible. And so a few of us got together and said, hey, let's get out of here. And so we banded together, 3 families. First, we traveled around the country, drove up and down the United States. And we happened to know people in Tennessee. And we knew the farm was in Tennessee.
Right.
And we thought, wow, 600 people. These guys are pretty smart. We actually had heard Stephen speak at Columbia University.
Stephen Gaskin.
Stephen Gaskin, I'm sorry, yeah. Janet and I and a couple of our friends had gone to listen to him speak. And not that we were followers, but a lot of what he said made sense. And we decided, well, if these guys think Tennessee is good, and I had gone to school in Tennessee. I'd gone to school in Millington and swore I would never come back. And yet Middle Tennessee was wonderful. It was like upstate New York where we used to go camping. So from NBC, we said, okay, let's go out, and we decided to look for land in Tennessee, and we knew some people that had a farm in Jackson County, and we went to meet with them. They turned us on to someone who sold land. This was in Jackson County, up in Whitleyville, on Riley Creek, and we wanted that farm so badly, but I couldn't give him a dime more than the money we had. That was the agreement. And it took about 4 or 5 meetings before he finally,
sold you the land?
He gave in and said, all right, I'm going to give it to you guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a beautiful place to live, though.
It was so wonderful.
And you painted murals in the Jackson County school, or in
10 of them.
10 of them, yeah.
There was a grant called Artists in the School from, I believe, the Tennessee Arts Commission. And the principal of the Gainsborough Elementary School, Richard Norton, knew that everybody knew that I had worked for NBC. Okay. And Richard Norton knew I was an artist and came to me and said, if you're into doing it, I will put up half and the state will put up the rest. But you have to paint in all the schools, and you have to paint what each principal wants.
Oh, wow.
And out of the 10, there were only 2 schools where the principals were dumbfounded that an artist showed up and said, I'm at your service, tell me what you want me to paint. And 2 of them said, paint whatever you want.
Wow.
And so I had a lot of fun. And one of those murals still remains in Granville.
Oh, that's fabulous.
It's in Granville in what is now a community center. Used to be
a school.
That mural stayed, so it's still there.
You and Janet had a health food store. You started your own marketing graphics business. Tell me about that time.
Actually, the store was Janet and Faye's.
Okay.
They both started out together, and then Faye went from the store to her bakery, and Janet took over the store alone. And I was looking for work. I had an art studio called Artworks, on Dixie. And it's no longer there. It's part of the church, I think, now, that property. And I wasn't doing that well. But after a while, I went to work for Doug Stone, and I remember going in. He asked me if I would come work for him, and I did. I said, but I'm only going to come in if you make me art director. And he said, well, okay, but there's only going to be the 2 of us, so you'll have nobody to direct. But actually, it grew quickly.
Oh, yes, it did.
It did. It grew quickly. And Doug was a great mentor for me. He helped me learn to love words. I really began. I always wrote, but I began to write more after working with Doug. And I worked there for about 3 years. And then I went off and opened a photography studio with a professional photographer. It was photography and design, called Professional Images. And that lasted 11 months, and then we just couldn't do it together. And I said, Janet, we can do this. And so she left the store, and I bought some camera equipment, and we just started In-House Creative. That was the name of our company. And we worked together for 14 years, but Janet got injured in 1988 and struggled with that injury for 10 years before. She just couldn't do it anymore.
Wow. Wow.
And that was when I went to work with at MMA Creative.
Now, you're also a man of faith. I know you are.
I am a man of faith. I'm not a religious man, though.
Right.
I'm really not. But I'm a strong believer, and always have been.
Mm-hmm.
As a young boy, my mother said, there is a God. And she was always straight with me. And so I accepted that.
Now, so you and Janet have a son, Asa,
We do.
that I was fortunate to be his preschool teacher for a while.
That's a mind blower.
It is a mind blower. A wonderful child, and now he has a child.
That's right.
So these retirement years, what are they like for you?
They're real busy.
Yeah.
On a level. I stay active.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing for me is boredom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to fill my days creatively. I swim every morning, and I work hard. I like to take naps
Mm-hmm.
at midday. Janet and I are kind of like Europeans. We eat late at night, and we're always learning, both of us. It's wonderful to have a companion who, and we always said this in our marriage, that we had to grow together or we'd grow apart. And so we've always shared our knowledge with each other and our interests. We may not have the same interests, but we have a pretty tight bond. And it's wonderful to be that close to another person in your life. It's quite rewarding. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
For sure, but it's quite rewarding.
You also have a bond with this area.
Oh yeah, I love Tennessee, and I love Cookeville. I think it's a special place. I've met some very talented people, and I'm all about, and you know this, I'm all about pro bono work for this community. In 1992, I think, or 5. I followed the volunteer fire department for a year and created a book at the end of it. And I have to tell you, that was a life-changing experience. I kept a journal of that experience. I went to 42 fires in 1 year. I shot 1,200 photographs.
Wow.
Saw 1 fatality. But I also saw, I guess, the human spirit. On both sides, I saw people give up so much energy to help other people. And then I saw other people lose everything materially.
Right.
And have to deal with that. But the people in the volunteer fire department, men and women, both, were certainly humbling to me. And it took a lot to let go of that, right?
Oh.
I didn't want to stop, but you can't do everything forever.
I know you have art pieces that are personal and impactful. So tell me about one.
As a young boy, I had seen I used to pass somebody on the way to school who was disabled, and I was afraid. I was afraid of that person. They just were so different. I'd never seen anybody who looked that way. And 20-something years later, working in Gainsborough, that same person walked down the street in the person of Henry Sadler, who had suffered as an infant from high fever, and parts of his body didn't develop right. He had a hard time walking. He couldn't use his arms. His head wobbled around. But inside that body, and I jumped down off a ladder and ran out there and said, I need to meet this guy. And we became fast friends. And I learned so much about patience, humility, and also the struggle that people who are different come up against in life. Because most people, their first reaction is fear. Difference means fear. And Henry was just the warmest, nicest person and we had so much fun together, and we were from totally different worlds, totally. And yet I felt so welcomed in his home, and he in ours.
How are you going to take that with you? How do you take these paintings, these people, these memories?
As a reward, I think. I have to say, my life's full. It's been full. It's had ups and downs. It had some real downs. And yet, I'm a big reader of history, a student of history. Mm-hmm. And I'm familiar with the suffering of the world. Mm. And as hard as times are for me sometimes, they're never as hard as others that I've been familiar with. And Henry stands out in that place as a hero to me. And, I hope to gracefully go through the rest of life with that knowledge and those feelings and act accordingly.
Well, I think you will, and I hope I'll be right there with you.
I hope so, too.
All right. Love you and Janet. Thank you so much.
A pleasure. An honor.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.